Guys, looks like it might just be me on the live feed today, but I know some of you will be doing this practice later. So when you do set up your practice, be sure if you've got yoga blocks, grab 2. If not, grab 2 or 3 beach towels. They get nice and solid, so you can roll them up sort of like this. So you'd fold it into about thirds, give or take. Maybe even quarters, and then you can roll it up, and you get kind of thick roll, and that will serve similar purpose to the blocks as we might use them today. Also go ahead and make sure you grab a blanket or 2. One, it might create some softness as we lay on our mat, especially in our shoulder openers. You might also want the blanket to provide some support in some of the hip openers if a block or a rolled towel or a bolster happens to be too high. Today's restorative class is going to mostly focus on our hips and shoulders. Those are places where we tend to hold a lot of tension. So as you gather your props, just kind of make sure they're all in pretty good reach. Some of these you might have to shimmy shake the prop once you get there. In a face-to-face class, I would come around and rearrange your props for you. So, I mean, I guess if you've got somebody at home that you can direct around, awesome. Also, I'm going to have my phone out, not for correspondence, but so that I can time us and make sure we don't spend too much time on one side and not enough on the other, especially important for any of our hip openers and things like that. So I'm also going to face you this way today, long ways on the mat, so you can see some of the different placements of the props. Hopefully that will work for you as you set up your practice at home later, or if you join me here in the next few minutes. So to start class today, I know I just said we're going to focus on hips and shoulders, but we are going to start in a comfy seat. Personally, I like to sit on my bolster, but you're welcome to sit on anything that is comfortable. You do not have to sit cross-legged. You can sit with one leg out, both legs out, just whatever is comfortable for you and your body. Remembering that as we explore this restorative practice, you're not going to try to force stretches or force depth. You're going to let depth come in the amount of time that we spend in the posture. Today, some of our practice will be a little bit more active. If you did restorative with me last week, everything was very much a passive stretch, really settling in. But a couple, particularly the hip openers, might seem a little more active, leaning more into some of the yin postures versus the restorative postures today. But to start, finding that comfy seat, you've got one hand, most likely your opposite hand, of a foot. We're going to hold hands with our feet. If you don't love feet, sorry, at least they're just your own. So you're going to weave your fingers in between your toes. My toes like to be really smushed together, so this one is a little hard for me. So you've got your fingers woven through your toes, and you're just going to kind of wiggle them in there. So you're holding hands with your foot. And you can jiggle the toes around, circle the ball of the foot, flex and point the toes, grab and release with the hands. Just feeling some space there. Often we don't have a lot of space there, and if we do, it's usually just between that big toe and second toe, especially if you tend to wear flip-flops, and some of us, it might actually be flip-flop season. So just kind of massaging it out, maybe grabbing and gripping and then letting the foot move around. If you have any weird toe stuff going on, ball of the foot, this might be a lot for you. And so don't worry if your hands and fingers are not completely woven through your toes. Inviting whatever space you are able to do as you sit here. Finding about 30 more seconds here. Feeling what's happening in your feet. Maybe noticing cracked nail polish, toenails that maybe need cutting. But ignoring that, not worrying about it here. And then gripping in with the foot, pressing the toes against the hand and squeezing the foot with the fingers. You can begin to try pretty forcefully. Again, the amount of effort is up to you. Beginning to pull the fingers out of the toes. There'll be a moment where they pop right out. You might feel a lot more space in the feet. And then we'll switch sides. Weaving the fingers between one foot, you'll find pretty quickly that one foot might like this activity better than the other. You can begin to find any movement similar to your first side. I really like to circle through the ball of the foot, bending the toes up and down. Got a lot of old foot and toe injuries. So this is something my feet definitely need. But even if you don't, we tend to be pretty hard on our feet. And so giving them some sort of soothing self-massage is pretty helpful for them. Maybe you grip, release, grip, and release. Again, any movements here that feel good. If you're outside, maybe you've got a bright blue sky, maybe a gentle breeze. I'm happy it's warm enough to practice outside today. And letting yourself find whatever your foot needs for another 30 seconds, give or take. You can even pull the toes down and then release. And then gripping nice and tight, fingers into toes, toes into the hand. Foot is very active, hand is very active, and you start to pull the fingers. And when you can no longer keep them connected, the fingers pop right out of the toes. Maybe you spread and grip the toes briefly. Circle out the ankle if you'd like. Then we're going to come to a comfy seat. Maybe you're cross-legged, maybe not. Again, you're welcome to elevate the hips. I find if you are sitting cross-legged, having the bolster underneath just simply helps the knees find the floor. Even if your hips are pretty open, this tends to feel pretty nice for the hips and hip flexors. And there's a bee. And as we get started, we'll go ahead and briefly close your eyes, pausing, focusing in on the body, maybe drawing attention to the shoulders, noticing how the femur connects into the joint, and then taking your awareness to the hips, seeing how they feel, noticing where there might already be some openness, and then also taking note of where tension has settled. A lot of us are sitting a lot more, so our hip flexors might be tighter than normal. And then just simply pause, noticing the natural rhythm of your breath. As we go through different postures, I'll kind of guide different options for your breath, depending on where we're focusing. In general, your inhales create space, and the exhales might find some depth into those postures. Remembering in our restorative and or yin practice, we're staying for long holds. So we're not finding the depth of our stretch right away, but we're letting the body ease into the stretch. Maybe you find a little bit of depth slowly. So you're not going to the edge right away. And so briefly, just dropping the chin to the chest. Maybe it finds contact, keeping shoulders stacked over hips, so you're not rounding through the shoulders, you're only moving through the neck. And you'll just take some gentle half moons across the collarbone. The pace of this is up to you. I like to go slow, massaging through the throat, feeling movement through the back of the neck in particular here. Loosening up the neck before we open through the shoulders. Once that tick-tock feels even, pause briefly with your chin on the chest, and then stack the head back on top of the spine. And we're just going to gently take the chin over one shoulder, a slow shake of the head no. Not forcing, but just simply acknowledging range of motion and movement through the neck here. And then, as that feels even, return head center. We'll find one more, tilting ear to shoulder, not shoulder to ear, just dropping and then reaching up and over. Again, finding some movement, maybe feeling a little bit of stretch into the tops of the shoulders and the traps. Again, resisting the urge to move through the whole body here, just isolating the movement to the neck. And then, once you feel even, settling, head stacked on top of the spine. And we'll inhale, arms reach high. Exhale, hands to heart center. Finding a nice deep inhale once more. Exhale, hands to heart. And then we'll set up for our first posture here. Maybe padding your mat to make it a little bit softer. We're going to lay on our side here. Sometimes a little bit of cushion under hip bone. Feels pretty nice. For this posture, you're only going to need your 2 pillows or 1 pillow, finding hopefully a relatively firm pillow. That's why I suggest a couple pillows depending on firmness. And we're going to set up that bolster on one side of your mat. You might shimmy it in just a smidge. You might end up having to move it up or down depending on where your arm ends up falling. Once you get that bolster secure, feel free to grab a blanket or a towel to pad under your pillow or under your head as a pillow. And then I'm going to lay on my left side first. But remember, we've got two sides, so it doesn't really matter which one you start on. You're going to find a comfortable spot to lay on your side. That bottom arm can just reach out straight in front of you from your shoulder. And then you could fold up that pillow to make it a little more comfortable for your head. And you're going to reach your top arm straight up to the ceiling. You might test. Eventually, you're going to drop your arm back onto the bolster. So you might test and see if that arm will clear it as we start here. But first, you're going to let that arm stack straight above the shoulder joint. And we're going to just take some gentle circles to start in one direction. Little circles, just stirring the pot, feeling the arm moving in the shoulder joint. Then you can gently, if you so choose, begin to broaden those circles. Maybe they're about the size of a volleyball or a soccer ball. For a couple of rotations. And then maybe they expand to a beach ball. Maybe even slightly bigger. Feeling some movement, range of motion. And then, wherever you are, simply begin to reverse that circle. We'll start big and eventually end up stirring the pot. Just feeling that shoulder moving. Maybe you feel your hips working to stay stacked on top of each other. And then the circle starts to shrink a little. Maybe you're getting a little bit toward beach ball or soccer ball. And then eventually arriving and stirring that pot. A very micro movement once you arrive to that point of revolution. And letting that arm come to stillness over your head. So we're going to start here by gently reaching the arm over the ear. Bicep can rest on the face. Just feeling some length through the side body. Maybe you even stretch the top leg long, continuing that full side body stretch. And reaching the arm back up through center, and the leg can restack. And the arm drapes behind, finding that bolster if you need to let the bolster slide out farther. That's fine. Maybe it needs to scoot up. And you're not finding the deepest twist here, but feel the bottom shoulder maybe scoot out. Your fingers might reach a little bit farther. Head could look up to the ceiling. Just simply breathing here. Inhales create length. Exhale makes that arm heavy on the bolster. Maybe that top hip drops a little bit as well. option to kick that top leg straight in front of you so it's parallel to your extended arm. Remembering that's only an option. That might get into both shoulders and hips here of the supported side. If that big toe happens to be in reach, you could bend and then extend the foot. Big toes, peace fingers to big toes. If you've got that toe hooked, be sure to flex through the heel, protecting the knee and ankle. If you've taken that peace finger grip, release the foot, bring the knee stacked back on top of the bottom leg. An arm that's extended behind can reach back up center, and then just let it rest gently on your side. Pause briefly. And then you might have to scoot your hips a little bit to one side so you can find your spine on the mat. Reaching your hands straight up to the ceiling as if you're pressing a block. You just simply reach the arms behind. Thumbs might find the floor. You might find one side feels a little bit better than the other. Feet can be planted on the mat here or extended long. Inhale, both arms come center, releasing them down by your side. Pausing in that neutral spine. If you'd like a brief windshield wiper of the knees, feel free. Before we transition to our second side, maybe you can move without sitting up and doing a whole lot of work here, or maybe you've got to sit up and readjust. You might also find that you need cushion under one hip versus the other, so honor that as you switch sides. As you settle in, scooch that block so you can shimmy up against it. Maybe imagining that is like a big spoon. If you're a cuddler, you know what I mean. And then settling into your second side. Finding that pillow if you'd like. Knees can be bent as much or as little as you like. Helping you find stability here. Maybe you squish that block in or bolster in or pillow. Maybe you test. See if your bolster and pillow might need to move a little bit. And then we'll reach that top hand high. Feeling it stack right over the shoulder joint. Often we tend to splay it back or rock it forward, but it's straight up out of the shoulder. And then you can begin stirring the pot in one direction. Feeling some micro movement here. Then gently letting that circle get bigger. Maybe it's the size of a soccer ball. Gradually escalating that beach ball size. Or maybe even the size of that fitness ball. but keeping the circle that you're drawing on the ceiling. And then reversing your revolution, staying big. And becoming incrementally smaller. Maybe you're to that beach ball. And soccer ball. And eventually, gently stirring the pot on your second side, or your second revolution direction. And pausing, feeling stillness through the arm. Because your arm is stacked over the joint, it shouldn't be a whole lot of work to hold it here. Similar to when we stick our legs straight up over our hip. Then that arm reaches forward, bicep rests on the ear. Maybe you stay here. You've got a little bit of stretch happening on the side body into the top of the hip. Maybe the top leg stretches down toward the bottom of your mat. Deepening ever so slightly. Then the top knee bends once more. Hand reaches toward the ceiling. And then that arm drapes behind you. Maybe you scoot the bolster out slightly or down. It may not be exactly the same as your first side. And that's okay. Just first feeling how this changes from one side to the other. And then honoring any options of depth you'd like here. Maybe that bottom shoulder creeps out slightly. Fingers reaching a little farther away. Maybe the gaze is up at the ceiling. You could also look over the shoulder. Personally, I don't like that one on my neck with the added support of a prop. Option to deepen the stretch into the top hip by kicking that top foot straight out from the hip. Becomes parallel with the arm that's already extended. Maybe you breathe here for a breath or two, deciding if this is what your body needs or wants. And remembering the option to grab peace fingers around big toe as you extend that foot out. You can still let the foot heel rest on the floor, but do flex through the toes, protecting your joints. Inhales create length. Exhales, find depth. You took that peace finger option, releasing the big toe, letting that knee come back to stack. And reaching the arm back up to the ceiling. Hand just simply rests on your side, pausing. Head can turn back to that extended arm. And then gently making your way back, spine to the mat. Feet can stay planted or stretch out long. And hands reach straight up to the ceiling, thumbs pointing towards your head or behind you. And then gently let the arms reach. Maybe you find both hands drop more evenly now or with more comfort. And reaching the arms back up, hands pause by your side. Maybe a gentle sway of the knees. And then transitioning to our next posture. So making your way up to a seat, maybe scooching some props around. Lots of options here. Targeting into the hips. We're gonna do 2 hip openers and then switch sides. We're gonna start with 90-90. Some people call it fire log. And then eventually we'll transition into sleeping pigeon. As we set up here, you might need a bolster, you might need a block or 2 blocks, pillows, whatever it is you have. I like to use the front edge of my mat because it makes that nice 90-degree corner. So the short edge and the long edge. So setting up here, bringing, if I'm your mirror, this is your right knee in line with the corner of your mat. The shin bone is in line with the front of the mat. The quad is in line with the long edge of the mat. And then you grab that ankle of the other foot, cross it on top of the quad. Ideally, you keep this foot flexed. Maybe this knee drops right down onto the foot. If so, super happy for you. Or maybe it's up really high. Personally, I like to have a cushion underneath my ankle. My ankles are kind of bony and they dig into the quad. Not super comfy. So that's one thing that you could do. Another thing you might do is grab a block or a rolled up towel and pop it to support this leg. Maybe it's under the quad, maybe it's on a high side under the knee. Finding where is most comfortable. This is a pretty intense hip opener. Depending, you might even take those pillows and plop them underneath there as well. You may not need a whole lot more to feel anything here. You might just stay upright, still feeling shoulders stacking over hips. You've got your sits bones pressing down, resisting the urge to rock back on your tailbone and tilt your pelvis. You want to stay right on top of the pelvis. Maybe you imagine there's that string from the crown of the head pulling you tall. Maybe the arms rest, giving you a little bit of external pressure, opening down through the hip. Depending on how your hips work and how they're put together, you may feel this in several places. I tend to feel it on the outer hip and even into the quad, wrapping around on the top leg, and very much on the outer of the bottom leg, at least for this side. If you're like, nope, don't feel anything, first thing to check is make sure you didn't pull your heel in towards your hip and sit more like crisscross applesauce versus 2 lines on top of each other. The next option is you can start to fold forward, reaching up to go forward as opposed to, again, drooping back. Maybe you just start to walk the fingers and you're like, oh, there it is, found it. Maybe you grab one of your props if you're not already using it. This would be a great option to get a little bit forward, but not too much. You could rest on your pillow. Acknowledging the difference between sensation and pain. This is a particularly sensational hip opener. But it shouldn't be sharp or shooting. You took that forward fold, walk yourself up. Scooch that any support that you had a little bit out of your way here. Transition might be a little bit funky. I like to just lift the foot up. You might even pause, let it shake in front a little. Sometimes that bend is a little bit intense on the knee. You might move the posture or the blocks or props, whatever you had. And you're welcome now to pull this bottom leg, pulling that heel back, making a more acute angle versus a 90-degree angle. This top leg, it's gonna reach around behind you. Creeping into pigeon pose, this heel can pull closer to the hip. Starting in a nice square position here. So resisting the urge to rock out, we want to make sure we maybe feel something happening up here in that hip flexor. So you're working to have two square hips, and there's lots of things you can do to help yourself find that, even if your hips are open. So maybe you pop a block under a booty cheek. That might protect your knees a little bit. If pigeon is inaccessible to you, feel free to take recline pigeon, that figure 4. Sometimes, depending on any old injuries to our knees, pigeon just is not great. You might have that block under a booty cheek. You might not quite need a block, but maybe just a fold or two to a towel or blanket. Just inviting that roll forward a little. If you're like, nope, still need more depth, the next thing to start doing is to once again realign that shin with the front edge of your mat. Feeling free to find that depth if it's there for you. If you happen to have really open hips, you do need to have some core engagement here so that you stay nice and square and you don't accidentally sink into too deep of a stretch. The core engagement for me helps me feel this stretch on my hip flexor of the extended leg. When you're ready, you could start to hinge it forward. Maybe you come to elbows. Maybe you find a pillow. Maybe you just surrender all the way down. Wherever your pigeon is today, maybe you make a pillow out of your arms. Simply making sure you're finding that point directly between boring and excruciating, right? You should be feeling some sort of sensation. It should be a little bit interesting to your body, but it should not be over stretching. And it also shouldn't be boring where you feel nothing. You're just like, yep, just gonna hang out. Here, your inhales create space. And the exhales surrender to a little bit more depth of stretch. Remembering that in our restorative and yin classes, we're moving beyond stretching the muscles, and we're finding space and maybe a little bit of elasticity in our connective tissues. This means it takes a little bit longer. gently beginning to walk yourself out of your sleeping pigeon. Maybe you just simply press through the hands slightly and open the chest up. Might find a little more depth on that hip flexor. Then you can rock your hips to the side and begin to bring the legs back around front. Before we switch sides, go ahead and straighten both knees, maybe jiggle through the quad, shake it out. That left, or your right knee, sorry, would have been bent for a pretty long time. So you might need a little bit of a change of pace before we switch sides. And then making sure whatever props you need are nearby. And we'll begin setting up for our second side. Be sure to go into your second side with no expectation. Our hips can be very different from one side to the other. So if you're using me as your mirror, your second side will be your left knee in line with the front corner of the mat, shin bone in line with the front edge, quad in line with the long edge. Honoring these differences and explorations of postures that may not be your favorite. Then crossing the top leg up and over the quad. Noticing maybe your knee is different. The space between my knee and my foot is vastly different today. And once again, finding whatever cushion or support you might need. Again, I like to take a little bit of cushion underneath my ankle. Or maybe you just stay right here. Remembering that option for a block or rolled towel underneath. If you're using that, depending on how high your knee is, most likely it's more supporting at the quad versus the knee itself. But depending on height, you might actually have some support. Just depends on how that shape is happening for your body. Again, you've got length in the low back, which means you probably have a little bit of core engagement. Finding a long spine, shoulders are staying stacked over hips. You just sit and breathe into this posture. As you pause, you might find a little bit of tension let go. For me, I feel this slightly differently than I did on my first side. I feel some stuff happening in my hip flexor of the bottom leg. Again, checking in if you're not feeling any sensation, look for that straight stack versus that angled knee. If these were my legs. Then you might start to reach forward. Maybe you grab a prop and bring that forward fold closer to you. Sometimes that hinge helps press that foot, that knee down. But remembering, we don't want to force the knee to be a heel. Just letting it eventually fall down, potentially, of its own accord. Might even feel some release in your low back. I'm feeling some space on this side with the bottom hip. I do 2 or 3 more rounds of breath here. And then we'll transition to pigeon on the side. And we'll come back up, scooching props out of your way. Gently uncrisscrossing that top leg. Maybe you plant that foot, knee to the ceiling to release any tension that might have settled into that leg. You can fold your bottom heel closer to the opposite hip as we swing that other leg back behind us. Feeling the kneecap on the mat, maybe that bottom hip, back hip starts to square. Maybe you find you don't need props, or maybe you need them on the side. Remembering the option for a block under a booty cheek. You could also use a pillow or a bolster there. Or if you don't need a whole lot, just a smidge to rock you forward slightly so that you can feel squareness. Maybe you have a blanket or a fold or two. Mostly in this particular pigeon, you tend to feel it on your external rotator of your bent leg. But because you're working to keep hips square, you also might feel some space on the front of that extended thigh. When you're ready, you can surrender it down, feeling free to grab a pillow or a prop, or use your arms, pausing at the elbows, or maybe crossing the arms like a genie and using your hands as a pillow. If you're in search of additional depth, you can return that knee or that shin bone to square with the front edge of your mat or anywhere in between, allowing yourself to find your depth of your pigeon here. And again, as you find depth, don't sacrifice integrity of posture by rocking out. You still want to stay square as if two shoulders could evenly fold over the front of the leg. We've got about 1 more minute. And you can gently walk yourself up. Maybe you press into the hands and open the chest to the ceiling. And then now you can drop your hip off to the side. Swing that back leg back around. Straighten the bottom leg. And again, maybe you jiggle it out. Walk the hips out a little. Whatever you need to release any tension, feeling free to drop the hands behind you, plant the feet. You can windshield wiper the knees here. And beginning to find your Shavasana. So finding where you can be completely comfortable on your mat. Maybe you're just stretched out long, arms and legs splayed wide. As you find your back to the mat, feel free to hug the knees to the chest, rock gently from side to side. Maybe even a happy baby where you grab the blade edges of the feet and rock your body from side to side as well. Feeling free to use props. If you have a wall close to you, maybe you choose to rest in legs up the wall. If you choose to do that, feel free. You just Find some space, shimmy up one hip, and let the legs swing up. You might have to inchworm your hips a little bit closer once you get the torso to the mat. Just finding anywhere you can find comfort and surrender. You might notice some lingering sensations in the hips or shoulders as you settle into your mat. Maybe you need a blanket. Often we don't generate a lot of heat in our body when we do a restorative class. If you've got pillows and you would like to lay flat on the mat, feel free to put them under your knees. That releases tension in your low back. You could also let your bottoms of your feet come together and your knees go wide. If that is happy for your hips, feel free to stay like that. Or you could take your rolled up towels or blocks underneath, creating support so that you're not opening too far and gravity isn't working against your body. As you settle here, you can draw the mind inward. Perhaps you focus on a sense of security. Deep hip openers tend to release anxiety. Now, as you settle into Shavasana, you can replace that with a sense of security, safety within your own body. Meditating yourself, reminding yourself, I am safe. I am secure. Perhaps repeating that to yourself silently or out loud. I am safe. I am secure. Inhaling security. Exhaling tension. Inhaling safety. Exhaling anxiety. I am safe. I am secure. Feeling a sense of comfort, settling within your body. Because you are safe and secure. Slowly deepen your breath. Drawing conscious movement back into the body. Maybe you run the thumb over each finger. Perhaps you wiggle at the toes. Gently inviting any other intuitive movement back into the body. Maybe gently wiggling the rib cage, nodding the head gently, circling wrists and ankles. And taking a full body stretch, fingers away from toes, and hugging everything in, knees to chest, nose to knee. Feeling the security and safety of your own body. Then as you're ready, you can continue pausing on your back or roll to your favorite side. Pausing there as your practice settles into your body. And slowly making your way to a comfortable seat. Eyes are closed or downcast. Pausing, feeling length through the spine, stability through the joints. Space in the hips and shoulders. Inhale, arms reach high, palms meeting at the top. Exhale, hands pause at your third eye as you seek openness of mind. Stay rest at your lips so that you find honest words may settle at your heart as you arrive at a happy heart. Thank you for allowing me to be your guide for your practice. Namaste.